When my wife and family learned about my lottery win, they planned a family trip at my expense. On the day, they abandoned me, my wife's sister's wheelchair-bound daughter, at the airport, saying, "You're in the way." Later, my wife called, screaming. I couldn't hold back my laughter, because my name's Gavin Cole, and if life were a movie, I'd be the guy who gets killed off in the first 15 minutes just to establish how dangerous the villain is. I'm 39 years old, work as a technician fixing everything from busted refrigerators to existential crises disguised as printer jams, and I've got a wife who thinks for better or worse was just a suggestion, not a binding contract. Melissa Cole, formerly Melissa Henderson, back when she still pretended to like me, is the kind of woman who believes she's achieved peak sophistication because she once bought a designer handbag on credit and hasn't shut up about it since. That bag cost more than my first car, and honestly, my first car had more personality and gave me less grief. Life at home had become as predictable as a rerun of a sitcom nobody asked for. Every morning started with Melissa's passive-aggressive commentary about my lack of ambition, which is rich coming from someone whose biggest accomplishment this year was getting verified on Instagram with exactly 200 followers. Half of them bots, the other half her own alternate accounts. Her sister Tracy would swing by at least 3 times a week to brag about her latest MLM scheme or her daughter's participation trophy collection, acting like she'd raised the next Olympic champion when really, her kid Ivy was just good at being a decent human being despite having Tracy as a mother. And then there was Linda, Melissa's mother, the woman who could suck the joy out of a puppy party. Linda had this special talent for showing up unannounced, critiquing my average energy, and eating all the good snacks I'd hidden in the back of the pantry. I'd mastered the ancient art of nodding along while mentally constructing elaborate taco recipes in my head, because if I actually listened to half the nonsense that came out of their mouths, I'd have checked myself into a monastery by now. But then came the day that changed everything, or at least, it changed what I thought was going to be everything. It was a Tuesday, which is already the worst day of the week because at least Monday has the decency to be obviously terrible. I'd stopped at the corner gas station on my way home from a job, where I'd spent 4 hours explaining to a grown man that his laptop wouldn't turn on because he'd never plugged it in. I grabbed my usual, a pack of gum, a questionable hot dog that had been rotating on those heated rollers since the Clinton administration, and a $10 lottery ticket. I'd been buying these tickets every week for about 5 years, not because I actually thought I'd win, but because that tiny slip of paper represented $10 worth of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could escape the gravitational pull of my mundane existence. It was cheaper than therapy and had roughly the same success rate. I scratched off that ticket while sitting in my truck in the driveway, procrastinating the inevitable moment I'd have to walk through my front door and pretend to care about whatever new crisis Melissa had manufactured. I wasn't paying much attention, honestly, just scraping away the silver coating while mentally calculating how many more years until retirement, when I noticed something weird. The numbers matched. Not just 1 or 2 numbers, all of them. I checked again, because surely this was some kind of cosmic prank. I pulled out my phone, Googled the lottery website, and nearly dropped my phone into my lap when I realized I'd hit the 3rd prize jackpot. I wasn't buy a yacht and retire to the Bahamas rich, but I was definitely pay off the mortgage and tell my boss where he can stick his performance reviews rich. For about 30 glorious seconds, I sat there imagining all the possibilities. I could finally fix up my workshop, maybe take that trip to Colorado I'd been dreaming about since before Melissa decided camping was beneath her aesthetic. I could breathe. But then reality crashed back in like an unwanted relative at Thanksgiving, because I absolutely knew, that the moment Melissa found out about this money, my life was about to become exponentially more complicated. And I was right. I was so tragically, hilariously right. I walked into the house trying to play it cool, but Melissa has this sixth sense for when something good happens to me that she can potentially ruin. She was in the kitchen, photographing her sad desk salad for her Instagram story with the caption, "Wellness Journey Day 847. Even though I'd watched her demolish an entire sleeve of Oreos the night before. The moment she saw my face, her eyes narrowed. "What happened? You look weird. Did you get fired?" "Please tell me you didn't get fired, Gavin, because I just ordered new throw pillows." "I didn't get fired," I said, and before I could stop myself, because apparently my mouth has a death wish, I added, I won the lottery. The transformation was instantaneous. Her pupils literally dilated like a cartoon character who just spotted a pile of gold. The salad was abandoned. Her phone was forgotten. She practically teleported across the kitchen island. You what? How much? Show me. Show me right now, Gavin. Her voice had gone up about 3 octaves, hitting frequencies only dogs and desperate housewives could hear. I pulled out the ticket and the confirmation email I'd already received. Third prize. It's not retirement money, but it's... Oh my God. We're rich, she squealed, and I didn't have the heart. Or maybe I just didn't have the energy to correct her definition of rich. She was already texting someone, her fingers flying across the screen with the kind of speed she never demonstrated when I asked her to help with literally anything. We should celebrate as a family, she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness I recognized as the auditory equivalent of arsenic in honey. Translation: we should spend your money while you carry the bags and smile for the photos she'll post to prove to her high school friends that she didn't marry a complete loser. I watched her spiral into planning mode, already talking about dinner reservations and calling her mother, and I felt this weird calm settle over me. Because here's the thing about being married to someone who only sees you as a supporting character in her own story. You get really good at seeing the plot twists coming. I knew exactly how this was going to play out. The family would circle like vultures who'd just spotted a wounded gazelle wearing a money belt. They'd all want a piece of my unexpected windfall, would frame it as family helping family, and would somehow make me feel guilty for even thinking about keeping my own money. But standing there in my kitchen, watching my wife transform into a one-woman planning committee for an event I didn't agree to, I made myself a promise. This money was mine. I'd earned it through sheer dumb luck and 5 years of persistent stupidity. And whatever happened next, I wasn't going to be the doormat anymore. I was going to enjoy watching this play out, because if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that karma has a sense of humor darker than mine. And boy, was I about to learn just how funny karma could be. Within an hour of Melissa finding out about my lottery win, my living room had transformed into what I can only describe as a hostile takeover meeting orchestrated by people who thought contributing meant showing up and breathing heavily. The family council had assembled with the kind of speed usually reserved for first responders, except instead of saving lives, they were here to dissect mine. Melissa sat on the couch like she was chairing a board meeting at Goldman Sachs. Her mother Linda had claimed my favorite recliner, the Audacity, and her sister Tracy was perched on the arm of the love seat, scrolling through her phone while simultaneously participating in the conversation, which is a talent only truly narcissistic people possess. They looked like the United Nations of freeloaders. If the UN's primary mission was figuring out how to spend someone else's money while making it seem like a democratic process. I stood in the doorway of my own living room feeling like a defendant about to be sentenced, except I hadn't actually committed any crime unless winning money fair and square was now illegal in the state of wherever the hell I was living. Gavin, sit down, Linda commanded, gesturing to the ottoman like I was a dog who'd just been called to heel. She was already sipping wine, my wine, from the bottle I'd been saving for an occasion that actually mattered, out of one of our good glasses. The woman had the elegance of a buzzard in a blazer. We need to discuss this blessing as a family. Blessing, I repeated, sitting down because apparently standing in my own home was now considered aggressive. That's an interesting way to describe something I won with my own money. Our money, Melissa corrected, her smile so tight it could have cracked her freshly Botoxed forehead. We're married, remember? What's yours is ours. Funny how that principle never applies to your credit card bills, I muttered. But nobody heard me because Tracy had just let out this theatrical gasp like she'd discovered the cure for cancer on her Instagram feed. Oh my God, you guys, I just saw the cutest resort in Los Angeles. Tracy squealed, flipping her phone around to show us a picture of what looked like a hotel from a lifestyle magazine. You know, the kind where they airbrush out all the poor people and fire hazards. We could totally do a family trip. Somewhere luxurious, with a pool and room service, and maybe one of those spas where they put cucumbers on your eyes for $200. I blinked. I'm sorry, did you just say we? As in, we. Plural. As in, you're inviting yourself on a vacation funded by money you didn't win. Tracy looked at me like I'd just suggested we eat our young. Gavin, don't be selfish. Family vacations are important for bonding. You wouldn't want to deny Ivy an experience, would you? And there it was, the trump card. Bringing up Ivy, Tracy's 17-year-old daughter, was their way of making me feel like a monster if I didn't immediately empty my wallet. Ivy was the only decent person in this entire bloodline, a sharp-witted kid who'd been in a wheelchair since a car accident when she was 12, and who somehow maintained her humanity despite being raised by Tracy. Using her as emotional leverage was low even by their standards. Ivy would probably rather I save for her college fund than blow it on overpriced hotel bathrobes, I said. But Linda was already shaking her head, her jowls swaying with the conviction of someone who'd never been right about anything but refused to acknowledge it. Education is important, but so are memories, Linda said, as if she were dispensing wisdom from a mountaintop instead of my recliner. Besides, Gavin, when was the last time you did something nice for this family? Melissa works so hard on her brand. Tracy is raising a special needs child alone, and I've been dealing with my sciatica flaring up again. I wanted to point out that Melissa's brand consisted of posting filtered selfies and occasionally shilling diet tea that gave people diarrhea, that Tracy's ex-husband paid child support and alimony that could fund a small nation, and that Linda's sciatica mysteriously only acted up when there was heavy lifting to be done or sympathy to be milked. But I learned long ago that logic was a foreign language in this house. Let me get this straight, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. You want me, the guy who just won this money, to pay for a vacation to Los Angeles, for all of you, so we can bond as a family? A family that, up until an hour ago, barely acknowledged I existed unless something needed fixing or someone needed a ride. Melissa's smile could have cut glass. You're being negative again, honey. Don't ruin the vibe. We're trying to include you in something special. Include me. I repeated slowly, tasting the words like they were spoiled milk. In my own vacation. That I'm paying for. How generous. It's only fair we all benefit from this blessing, Linda chimed in, taking another sip of my wine. She was already halfway through the bottle, which probably cost more than she'd contributed to society this year. Money changes people, Gavin. We're just making sure you stay grounded. Tracy nodded enthusiastically, finally looking up from her phone. Exactly. Plus, think about the Instagram content. We could all post from the same location, really show family unity. My followers would eat that up. I cleared my throat, trying to inject some sanity into this asylum masquerading as a living room. Here's a wild idea. What if I, the person who actually won the money, decided what to do with it? Maybe I want to take a trip. Solo. Just me. Alone. With nobody asking me to carry their bags or take their photo in front of a fountain. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, Linda's judgment crashing down like a ton of bricks wrapped in passive-aggressive disappointment. That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard you say, Melissa said quietly, and I could tell she was gearing up for the guilt trip of a lifetime. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed. What have you sacrificed? I interrupted, and even I was surprised by the edge in my voice. Your job? Oh wait, you don't have one. Your time? You spend 6 hours a day online shopping and watching reality TV. Your dignity? Pretty sure that shipped out around the same time you started an OnlyFans for artistic expression that got 3 subscribers, 2 of which were bots. Melissa's face went red. Tracy gasped. Linda clutched her pearls, literal pearls, the fake ones from JCPenney that she claimed were family heirlooms. How dare you? Melissa started, but before this could escalate into World War III, I heard the distinctive sound of wheels on hardwood. Ivy rolled into the room in her wheelchair, and the temperature immediately dropped. The kid had this way of commanding a space without saying a word, probably because she'd spent years watching these 3 operate and had developed a finely tuned bullshit detector. What did I miss? She asked, parking herself next to me. Let me guess. They're trying to convince Uncle Gavin that paying for a vacation he doesn't want to go on is somehow his idea? Ivy, adults are talking, Tracy said sharply. Adults, Ivy repeated, looking around the room. Right. The adults who've been screaming about a free trip for the past hour. Very mature. Much adult. I couldn't help but grin. This kid was going to rule the world someday. Linda cleared her throat, trying to regain control. Let's take a vote. All in favor of a family vacation to Los Angeles, funded by Gavin's winnings, raise your hand. 3 hands shot up immediately. Mine stayed firmly in my lap. Motion passes, Melissa announced smugly. We'll start planning tomorrow. Gavin, you'll handle the bookings since you're so good at technical things. After they'd finally dispersed, Linda taking the rest of my wine bottle, Tracy already texting her friends about the trip, and Melissa retreating to the bedroom to start packing even though we hadn't set a date. Ivy rolled closer to me. Uncle Gavin, she whispered, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. They're going to use you like an ATM with legs. You know that, right? I looked at this 17-year-old kid, the only person in this entire circus who treated me like a human being, and I grinned. They can try, I said, keeping my voice low. But this ATM has withdrawal limits and a really petty sense of humor. Ivy smiled back, and in that moment, I knew I had at least one ally in whatever chaos was about to unfold. Somehow, in the twisted logic that governs my household, I went from selfish lottery winner who should be grateful we're letting him breathe to official family vacation coordinator and chief bag carrier in less than 24 hours. It's amazing how quickly the narrative shifts when there's work to be done. Suddenly, I wasn't just some guy with money. I was the responsible one, the detail-oriented one, the one who understands how booking things works because you do computer stuff, right? Never mind that I fix refrigerators and rewire electrical panels for a living. Not plan luxury vacations for people who think roughing it means a hotel without a bidet. The morning after the family council, and I'm using air quotes so aggressive they could puncture steel, Melissa cornered me in the kitchen before I'd even had my coffee. This woman had the tactical planning skills of a military general when it came to spending money that wasn't hers. She was already dressed in her boss babe outfit, which consisted of athleisure wear that cost more than my monthly car payment and had never seen the inside of a gym. "Good morning, honey," she chirped, sliding a piece of paper across the counter like she was delivering a ransom note. I made a list of everything we'll need for the trip. I figured it would be easier if I organized my thoughts. I picked up the paper, and I swear to God, it was typed, formatted, and laminated. Who laminates a vacation demand list? Sociopaths, that's who. The title at the top read, Los Angeles Family Bonding Experience, Requirements and Expectations, in a font that screamed, I took a graphic design class once, and now I'm insufferable. Let me break down this masterpiece for you. Destination, Los Angeles, with a footnote that said preferably near Beverly Hills for optimal photo opportunities. Accommodation, the Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel, 5 stars minimum. She'd underlined this twice. Transportation, business class flights, obviously, because we deserve comfort. I wondered who the we was, considering I was the only one paying. Activities, shopping on Rodeo Drive, spa day, fine dining experiences, and a surprise element that she'd refused to elaborate on. Duration, 1 week. She'd initially written 10 days, but had graciously revised it. How thoughtful. I looked up from this document that might as well have been titled, How to Drain Gavin's Bank Account in 7 Days or Less, and found Melissa staring at me expectantly, like a kid waiting for a gold star after turning in homework they'd plagiarized. You do realize I'm not Elon Musk, right? I said, setting the paper down before I was tempted to use it for its most logical purpose, kindling. This list reads like you're expecting me to fund a royal tour. Should I also arrange for a motorcade and police escort? Melissa's smile didn't waver, which was somehow more terrifying than if she'd gotten angry. You're being negative again, Gavin. This is exactly the kind of energy that holds you back in life. Don't ruin the vibe. The vibe, I repeated flatly. I'm ruining the vibe by pointing out that business class tickets for 4 people to Los Angeles would cost more than my truck is worth. And that's before we even talk about this hotel, which I'm guessing you found on some website that uses stock photos and broken English. It's a legitimate 5-star hotel, she insisted, pulling out her phone to show me the website. Look, it says luxury right in the name. The Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel. You can't fake that. I leaned in to look at her screen, and immediately, every alarm bell in my technician brain started ringing. The website looked like it had been designed by someone who'd learned HTML from a YouTube video in 2003. The photos were weirdly pixelated. The testimonials section featured reviews from people named John Smith and Jane Doe. Real creative. And the contact information was just a Gmail address. No phone number, no physical address beyond Luxury Mountain Road, Los Angeles, California. Melissa, I said slowly, like I was explaining fire safety to a toddler. This website screams scam. Look at this photo. That's literally the stock image that comes with Microsoft Word. I've seen it 100 times. She snatched her phone back, defensive now. You're just jealous because I found a good deal. Not everything has to be suspicious, Gavin. Sometimes good things happen to people who think positively. Good things like identity theft and credit card fraud. I muttered, but she was already walking away, probably to tell her mother about how unsupportive I was being. I stood there in my kitchen, holding this ridiculous laminated list, wondering how I'd ended up in this parallel universe where I was the crazy one for questioning a hotel website that looked like it was hosted on a GeoCities server someone forgot to shut down. But orders were orders, apparently, and if I wanted any peace in this house, a futile dream, but a man can hope, I needed to at least pretend to go along with this disaster in the making. Later that afternoon, while I was in my workshop trying to find my sanity somewhere between the socket wrenches and the existential dread, Ivy rolled in. The kid had this uncanny ability to show up exactly when I needed a reality check, or at least someone who wouldn't gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. Uncle Gavin, she said, maneuvering around my toolbox. Can I see that hotel website my mom and Melissa keep talking about? I pulled it up on my phone and handed it to her. Ivy scrolled through it for maybe 30 seconds before she started laughing. Not the polite kind of laugh, but the deep, genuine kind that comes from witnessing something truly absurd. Oh my God, she gasped between giggles. Uncle, this is so fake. Look at this. Their 5-star rating is written in Comic Sans. Comic Sans? What kind of luxury hotel uses Comic Sans? The kind that doesn't exist, I said, feeling validated in a way that probably wasn't healthy but felt great anyway. Ivy zoomed in on one of the photos. This picture of the grand lobby is literally from a real estate listing in Cleveland. I reverse image searched it. Cleveland, Uncle Gavin. This hotel is claiming a Cleveland office building lobby is their 5-star entrance. You're a better detective than anyone in this family deserves, I told her, meaning every word. She handed my phone back, her expression turning serious. Are you actually going to book this place? Because if you do, and it turns out to be some abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to feel bad for not warning you harder. You're warning me plenty, I assured her. But here's the thing, Ivy, I tried to tell them. I pointed out every red flag short of hiring a mariachi band to sing, "This is a scam," in 4-part harmony. They don't want to listen. They want what they want, and they want it on my dime. Ivy studied me for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. This kid was sharp, sharper than her mother would ever be, even if she got a brain transplant from Stephen Hawking. So what are you going to do? I smiled, and it probably wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that comes from spending years as a doormat and finally realizing you could just stand up. I'm going to do exactly what they asked. I'm going to book their dream vacation to Los Angeles, using the exact hotel they insisted on, through the exact website they found. And when it all goes sideways, which it will, spectacularly, I'm going to be very far away from the explosion. That's delightfully petty, Ivy said, grinning. But what about you? Are you really going to go on this trip with them? Kid, I said, leaning back against my workbench. I learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to win is to let people have exactly what they think they want. If they want the Grand Mirage luxury hotel so badly, who am I to deny them? I'm just the guy with the credit card and apparently no say in how it gets used. Ivy nodded slowly. Just promise me one thing. When this inevitably becomes a dumpster fire, you'll tell me all about it. I want details. I want to know exactly how this plays out. Deal, I said, shaking her hand like we were co-conspirators in the world's pettiest heist. But fair warning, it's probably going to be messy. Uncle Gavin, she said, wheeling toward the door. With this family, messy is the only setting we have. Might as well enjoy the show. And as I watched her leave, I realized she was absolutely right. If I was going to be forced into this circus, I might as well make sure I had the best seat in the house when the tent inevitably caught fire. The morning of the trip arrived with all the grace of a dumpster fire at a fireworks factory. I'd been up since 5 a.m. because apparently when you're the designated Sherpa for a family of freeloaders, you don't get the luxury of sleeping in before a vacation you didn't want to take. Melissa had packed enough luggage for a small army planning to invade a fashionable country. Tracy had shown up with 3 suitcases for a week-long trip like she was relocating permanently, and Linda had brought what I can only describe as a steamer trunk that probably hadn't seen daylight since the Titanic was considered seaworthy. I stood in the driveway at 6 in the morning, loading bag after bag into my SUV while the three of them stood around sipping coffee and critiquing my Tetris skills. "Be careful with that one, Gavin. It has my good shoes," Melissa warned, like I was juggling nitroglycerin instead of her overpriced footwear. Tracy was on her phone, naturally, probably live tweeting our departure to her 17 followers who definitely didn't care. Linda was providing color commentary about how her late husband, God rest his soul, though I suspect he died just to escape her, used to pack cars with real organization and efficiency. "You know what would be really efficient?" I grunted, shoving another suitcase into the back. "If any of you had packed less than your entire closet for a 7-day trip." "We need options, Gavin," Melissa said, like she was explaining quantum physics to a hamster. "You never know what occasions will come up. What if we get invited somewhere fancy? What if the weather changes? What if my Instagram aesthetic requires a wardrobe pivot?" I decided not to point out that the weather in Los Angeles in October was pretty consistently sunny and that her Instagram aesthetic was filtered within an inch of reality, because I was already sweating through my shirt and it wasn't even 7 a.m. yet. Ivy rolled down the driveway with a single backpack on her lap, looking at the luggage situation with the kind of bemused expression that suggested she was reconsidering her life choices. "Uncle Gavin, do they know we're going for a week? Not moving into Buckingham Palace?" she asked, parking her wheelchair next to me. "Logic and your family have never been on speaking terms," I replied, finally slamming the trunk closed with the kind of force that comes from deep, cellular frustration. "All right, everyone in. We need to leave now if we're going to make it through security before our flight boards." The drive to the airport was exactly as peaceful as you'd imagine transporting 3 narcissists and 1 teenager who was silently documenting everything for future therapy sessions would be. Melissa sat in the passenger seat, alternating between checking her makeup in the visor mirror and reading aloud from her phone about all the exclusive restaurants we'd be eating at, restaurants I was apparently expected to book and pay for, naturally. Tracy was in the back seat on a video call with someone, speaking in that loud, performative voice people use when they want everyone around them to know they're important. Linda was complaining about her seat position, the air conditioning, the radio station, and my driving, which was apparently too cautious despite the fact that I was going 5 miles over the speed limit. Ivy sat quietly next to her mother, headphones on, occasionally catching my eye in the rearview mirror and making faces that perfectly captured the absurdity of our situation. The kid had the patience of a Buddhist monk, probably because she'd been dealing with this circus her entire life. We arrived at the airport with exactly 90 minutes before our flight, which should have been plenty of time, except I had to unload mount luggage by myself, while everyone else immediately migrated toward the terminal entrance like I was their personal porter service. I managed to get everything onto 2 carts, a genuine feat of engineering that deserved some kind of award, and wheeled them inside while Ivy navigated beside me. "You okay, Uncle?" she asked quietly as we made our way to the check-in counter. "Define okay," I said, already feeling the stress headache forming behind my eyes. If okay means contemplating whether it's too late to fake my own death and start a new life in Montana, then yeah, I'm peachy. Check-in was a whole ordeal involving Melissa arguing with the agent about luggage weight limits like the laws of physics were negotiable, Tracy demanding an upgrade she hadn't paid for, and Linda insisting her trunk was a medical necessity, even though the only thing medically necessary about it was the chiropractor I'd need after lifting it. I stood there with my credit card out, watching my vacation fund evaporate in baggage fees, and wondered if this was what hell looked like: fluorescent lighting, overpriced airport coffee, and family members who treated you like a walking ATM machine. Finally, we made it through security, another adventure involving Linda setting off the metal detector 3 times because she refused to remove her costume jewelry, and arrived at our gate with about 40 minutes to spare. I was double-checking our boarding passes for the 15th time, making sure Ivy and I had our seats together, when Melissa suddenly stood up with Tracy and Linda. "We're going to get snacks," Melissa announced, already walking away. "Gavin, you stay here with Ivy and watch our carryouts. We'll be right back." Something in her voice made my internal alarm system start blaring, but I was too tired to interrogate it. "Sure, fine, whatever." Gate doesn't change, and boarding starts in 30 minutes. We know, Tracy said, not even looking at me as she followed her sister. They disappeared into the crowd of travelers, and I settled into the uncomfortable airport chair, trying to find a position that didn't make my back scream in protest. Ivy was on her tablet, probably texting her friends about what a disaster this trip already was. Around us, families were chatting excitedly about their vacations, couples were holding hands, and normal people were existing in a world where their relatives didn't treat them like disposable income. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20. Uncle Gavin, Ivy said, looking up from her tablet, they're boarding our section. I looked around. No sign of Melissa, Tracy, or Linda. The gate agent was calling zones, and people were lining up with their boarding passes ready. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine, the kind of feeling you get when you realize you've been had, but your brain is still trying to process the betrayal. I pulled out my phone and called Melissa. It rang 4 times before she picked up, and I could hear airport announcements in the background, but they sounded different from the ones at our gate. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level even though my blood pressure was approaching stroke territory. There was a pause, and then Melissa sighed. Actually sighed, like I was inconveniencing her by asking a simple question. "Gavin, listen. Tracy, Mom, and I talked, and we decided that, well, you and Ivy would just slow us down. You with your practical concerns and sensible budgeting, and Ivy with her needs. This is supposed to be a relaxing vacation, and we just think it would be better if we enjoyed it without the extra complications." I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "I'm sorry, what? You're ditching us? At the airport? After I drove you here, paid for everything, and loaded your ridiculous amount of luggage." "Don't be dramatic," she said, and I could practically hear her eye roll through the phone. "You're an adult. You can drive yourself home. We'll send you pictures. Think of all the money you'll save not actually going on the trip. Money I already spent on your tickets." My voice was getting louder now, and people were starting to stare, but I was way past caring about making a scene. "Well, that's just the cost of family, isn't it?" Melissa said sweetly. "Anyway, our flight is boarding. Different airline, better seats. We upgraded ourselves using your credit card information. Hope you don't mind. So I have to go. Don't sulk too much, okay? It's not a good look on you." And then she hung up. She actually hung up on me. I stood there in the middle of the airport terminal, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what had just happened. Around me, life continued. People rushing to gates, kids crying, announcements crackling overhead, but I felt like I was in some kind of bubble where reality had taken a temporary vacation. "Uncle Gavin," Ivy's voice cut through my shock. "Did they seriously just ditch us?" I slowly turned to look at her, and the expression on her face was somewhere between horrified and impressed. "Yeah," I said, my voice coming out weirdly calm considering I was internally screaming. "Yeah, they did. Congratulations, kid. We've just been upgraded to unwanted baggage class. Population us." People were definitely staring now. A woman with a baby gave me a sympathetic look. A businessman pretended not to eavesdrop, while clearly eavesdropping. The gate agent looked concerned, probably wondering if she needed to call security. I smiled, and it probably wasn't a sane smile, and said loudly enough for our growing audience to hear, "Don't worry, everyone. My wife just remembered she forgot her decency at home. Happens to the best of us. Carry on with your day." Ivy covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. "Uncle, you're making a scene." "Good," I said, finally letting the anger and absurdity of the situation wash over me. If I'm going to be abandoned at an airport by my own wife, I'm at least going to get some material out of it. And that's when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around expecting to see airport security ready to escort me out for disturbing the peace with my public meltdown. But instead I found myself face to face with someone I hadn't seen in about 15 years. Noah Grant stood there holding a coffee cup from one of those overpriced airport cafes where a latte costs more than a tank of gas, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and sporting the kind of smile that suggested he'd just witnessed the most entertaining thing he'd seen all week, which, considering my circumstances, was probably accurate. Gavin Cole," Noah said, his grin widening. "Holy hell, man, is that really you? I thought I recognized that voice from across the terminal. You always did have a gift for creative public speaking." It took my brain a second to catch up, probably because it was still processing the fact that my wife had abandoned me at an airport like I was a used newspaper someone left on a bench. But then recognition kicked in, and I found myself staring at my old college roommate, the guy I used to stay up until 3 a.m. with building robots for engineering competitions and debating whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. It is, fight me. Noah Grant, I said, and despite everything, I felt myself smiling. Man, you look like you actually figured out how to adult. What are you doing here? And more importantly, did you hear that entire phone call? Only the highlights, Noah said, gesturing toward a quieter corner near the coffee shop. Come on, let's grab a seat before you give the people a second act. Though honestly, that was pretty spectacular. Forgot her decency at home. I'm definitely stealing that line. I looked at Ivy, who shrugged and started rolling toward the coffee shop. I could use some hot chocolate anyway, she said. And Uncle Gavin could probably use something stronger, but it's 10 a.m. and we're in an airport, so coffee will have to do. We relocated to a small table area that smelled like burnt espresso and broken dreams. So basically every airport coffee shop ever. And Noah pulled up a chair while I tried to figure out where to even start explaining the absolute dumpster fire that was my life. Ivy parked her wheelchair at the table and immediately claimed a good chair, which I appreciated because at least someone in my vicinity had their priorities straight. So, Noah said, setting his coffee down and leaning forward with the kind of genuine interest people rarely show anymore. From what I overheard, your wife just ditched you at the airport? After you paid for a vacation? That's either the worst luck I've ever heard or the best story, depending on your perspective. Little bit of both, I admitted, signaling to the barista that I needed the largest coffee they had and possibly in 4 drip of caffeine directly into my veins. Long story short, I won some money on a lottery ticket. My wife and her family decided they deserved a vacation funded by said money, made me plan and pay for everything, and then ghosted me at the gate because apparently I'm too practical and Ivy here has needs that would ruin their luxury experience. Ivy raised her hand. The need in question is my wheelchair, which is apparently a massive inconvenience to people who've never had to think about accessibility in their entire privileged lives. Noah's expression shifted from amused to genuinely angry, which was interesting because I'd forgotten he had a younger sister with cerebral palsy. The man understood ableism in a way most people didn't. That's not just messed up, that's like several levels of messed up stacked on top of each other wearing a trench coat and pretending to be one normal-sized messed up situation. That's poetry, I said, accepting my coffee from the barista and taking a sip that burned my tongue but felt necessary for survival. You should write greeting cards. Sorry your family sucks. Here's a metaphor. Noah laughed, and it was the kind of genuine laugh that reminded me why we'd been such good friends back in college before life, careers, and geography had pulled us in different directions. He'd gone off to get his MBA and climbed the corporate ladder while I'd stayed local, married Melissa in what I now recognized as a decision made by someone with significantly impaired judgment, and settled into a life of comfortable mediocrity interrupted by occasional lottery wins and constant emotional manipulation. What are you doing here anyway? I asked, changing the subject because dwelling on my abandonment was just making me want to commit vandalism against the nearest vending machine. Last I heard through the grapevine, you were doing some big tech thing in Seattle. Still am, Noah confirmed, pulling out his phone to check something. Actually, I'm heading to LA right now for a business meeting. Big tech client, potential partnership deal, the whole corporate song and dance. My manager was supposed to come with me, but bailed last minute. Food poisoning from some sketchy sushi place. So now I'm flying solo and probably going to bomb this presentation because I'm more of a numbers guy than a people guy. Something clicked in my brain, the way it does when you're a technician and you suddenly see how all the broken pieces could fit together if you just approach the problem from a different angle. What kind of tech are we talking about? Smart home integration systems, Noah said. Basically making houses run themselves. Automated climate control, security, energy efficiency, all that jazz. What? Because, I said, feeling the first spark of something that wasn't misery I'd felt all morning. I've been installing and fixing that exact kind of system for the past 5 years. I could probably explain your product better than most of your sales team because I actually know how the guts work and why half of them fail within the first year due to poor electrical planning. Noah's eyes lit up like I'd just told him he'd won his own lottery. Are you serious? Gavin, man, this might be the universe's weirdest way of working things out, but I could genuinely use someone who knows this stuff. The client wants technical details, real-world applications, the kind of stuff that comes from actually working with the systems instead of just reading marketing materials. Uncle Gavin is really good at explaining broken things. Ivy chimed in, sipping her hot chocolate. He's had to explain his marriage for years, so technical systems should be easy. I snorted coffee through my nose, which was painful but worth it. Kid, you're going to make me actually like you. Too late. You already do, she shot back with a grin. Noah was already pulling up flight information on his phone, his fingers moving with the kind of speed that comes from being perpetually connected to work. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking, and feel free to tell me if this is insane, but I'm booked on a flight to LAX in about 45 minutes. Business class because the company pays for it, and I'm not a masochist. What if you two came with me? Gavin, you could help with my presentation, and honestly, after what your wife just pulled, don't you deserve an actual vacation that doesn't involve being treated like a human ATM? I looked at Ivy. She looked at me. We had one of those wordless conversations that happen between people who've bonded over shared trauma and a mutual appreciation for karmic justice. Free vacation? Ivy said slowly, like she was testing the words. Where we'd actually be wanted and appreciated. Where Uncle Gavin gets treated like a person instead of a wallet with legs. Versus going home to our empty houses and spending the week thinking about how we got ditched at an airport. When you put it that way, I said, feeling a smile creep across my face that was probably slightly unhinged but felt amazing. It seems like a pretty obvious choice. Noah stood up, already heading toward the ticket counter with the kind of confidence that comes from having an expense account and zero patience for inefficiency. Give me 10 minutes. I'll get you guys on my flight. We'll figure out hotel stuff when we land. And you can tell me every embarrassing story about your wife that you've been bottling up for however many years of marriage. 13 years, I called after him. And buddy, we're going to need more than a flight to LA to cover all of it. While Noah worked his corporate magic at the ticket counter. Apparently having a platinum status card and a company account makes airline employees significantly more helpful. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then I did something that felt petty and perfect in equal measure. I texted Melissa a photo of my coffee cup with the airport logo visible in the background. Thanks for the free morning. Really dodged a bullet not having to spend a week with you. Enjoy your scam hotel. Ivy leaned over to see what I was typing. That's going to make her mad. Good, I said, hitting send with more satisfaction than any text message had ever given me. She ditched me at an airport. I'm allowed to be petty. It's in the rule book under Justifiable Responses to Emotional Abandonment. 10 minutes later, Noah came back waving 2 boarding passes like they were winning lottery tickets, which, considering my recent luck with actual lottery tickets, felt appropriate. You're all set. Business class, window and aisle with the middle seat empty for Ivy's comfort, and I told them about the wheelchair situation so they're already prepping for early boarding. I looked at those boarding passes, then at Noah's genuine smile, then at Ivy's excited expression, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Actual hope that maybe, just maybe, things were about to get interesting in a good way for once. Noah Grant, I said, standing up and shaking his hand. You just saved me from spending a week rage cleaning my garage and plotting elaborate revenge scenarios. I owe you big time. Just help me not screw up this presentation, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. And maybe let me live vicariously through whatever karmic justice is about to rain down on your soon-to-be ex-wife. Deal, I said, and meant it. As we headed toward our gate, the right gate this time, with people who actually wanted us there. I felt my phone buzz with incoming texts from Melissa. I didn't even look at them. Whatever she had to say could wait until I was sipping champagne in business class, living my best life without her. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or planned. Sometimes it's just living well while the people who wronged you realize exactly what they threw away. And judging by the frantic buzzing of my phone, that realization was starting to hit. If someone had told me 24 hours ago that I'd be sitting in a business class seat at 35,000 feet, sipping complimentary champagne that actually tasted like something other than regret and poor life choices, I would have assumed they were having some kind of psychotic break. But there I was, living proof that sometimes the universe decides to stop kicking you in the teeth and instead hands you a glass of decent bubbly and a seat that reclines to an angle that doesn't make you question your will to live. Ivy was in the window seat next to me, completely absorbed in the fact that business class came with actual meals on real plates instead of the sad peanuts and broken dreams they serve in economy. She was working her way through some kind of fancy pasta situation that probably cost more than my usual grocery budget, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. Noah was across the aisle, laptop open, frantically preparing for his presentation with the kind of focused energy that reminded me why he'd been the one to graduate top of our engineering class, while I'd been perfectly content with my B+ average and significantly lower stress levels. Okay, real talk, Noah said, looking up from his screen with an expression that suggested he was reconsidering every decision that had led him to this moment. I'm about to walk into a meeting with executives from TechVantage Solutions, huge company, massive potential contract, and explain why our smart home system is better than the 17 other companies pitching to them this quarter. My manager usually handles the presentation side because I'm better at the back-end technical stuff, and now I'm realizing I have no idea how to make this sound impressive to people who don't actually understand how any of it works. I set down my champagne glass, my second one, because if you're going to have a mental breakdown about your wife abandoning you at an airport, you might as well do it with decent alcohol. What's the actual product? Give me the technical specs, not the marketing garbage. Noah launched into an explanation that involved a lot of buzzwords like integrated IoT ecosystem and machine learning algorithms and seamless user interface optimization. I let him talk for about 5 minutes, watching his corporate speak get more and more convoluted before I held up my hand. Dude, stop. You're explaining it like you're writing a press release for people who already know what you're talking about. Let me translate this into human language. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app because explaining things is basically my job and also my primary coping mechanism for dealing with life. Your system is basically a house manager that actually works, right? It learns what temperature people like when they usually come home, which lights they forget to turn off, and handles all of that automatically without requiring everyone in the family to have a PhD in computer science. Noah blinked. Yeah, actually, that's exactly what it is. But how do I make that sound impressive enough for a multi-million-dollar contract? You don't make it sound impressive, I said, getting into the zone the way I always did when someone brought me a technical problem that needed solving. You make it relatable. These executives aren't buying technology. They're buying solutions to problems they actually have. I guarantee every single person in that room has come home to a freezing house because their smart thermostat is too complicated, or has argued with their spouse about who left all the lights on, or has gotten locked out because their smart lock decided to have an existential crisis. Ivy looked up from her pasta. Uncle Gavin once fixed a smart home system where the thermostat was set to respond to voice commands, but the guy had a parrot that kept yelling, "Alexa, set temperature to 90, and the family couldn't figure out why their house felt like Satan's armpit. Noah started laughing so hard, he almost knocked over his laptop. That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of story that would make this relatable. Do you have more of those? Brother, I have years' worth of smart home disasters, I said, feeling more useful than I had in months. I've seen systems that locked families out of their own houses, thermostats that thought 40 degrees was a comfortable living temperature, and security cameras that kept sending emergency alerts every time a squirrel walked by. The problem with most of these systems isn't the technology. It's that they're designed by engineers who've never actually had to live with their own products. We spent the rest of the flight essentially rebuilding Noah's entire presentation. I told him stories about real installations I'd done, problems I'd fixed, and the common complaints I heard from customers who'd paid thousands of dollars for systems that made their lives more complicated instead of easier. Noah took notes like his life depended on it, occasionally stopping to say things like, "Oh my God, why didn't our marketing team think of this? And you're basically doing their job better than they are, and you don't even work for us." By the time we landed at LAX, Noah had a completely revamped presentation that focused less on technical specifications and more on actual human problems that his product solved. He'd replaced slides full of graphs and percentages with real-world scenarios I'd helped him write, like the family who could never agree on temperature settings until the system learned everyone's preferences and adjusted automatically, Or the parents who stopped worrying about whether they locked the doors because the system sent them confirmation alerts without being intrusive about it. Gavin, Noah said as we waited for Ivy's wheelchair to be brought up from cargo, a process that always took way longer than it should, because apparently airport efficiency is an oxymoron. I know I said you'd just be helping me prep, but would you be willing to actually come to this meeting? Having someone who can speak to the real-world technical side, someone who's actually installed and fixed these systems, would be huge. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Will there be coffee? Because I'm running on champagne and spite right now, and while that's a great combination for life in general, I should probably add some caffeine before I start talking to people who matter. The client is meeting us at their headquarters in downtown LA, and I promise they'll have good coffee, Noah assured me. These tech companies all think they're going to change the world through the power of expensive espresso machines. 2 hours later, after a car service ride that made me feel like someone important for once, and enough coffee to wake the dead, I found myself in a conference room that had better furniture than my entire house. The TechVantage Solutions team consisted of 5 executives who all had titles like Senior Vice President of Strategic Innovation, and looked like they'd never fixed anything with their own hands in their entire lives. They were the kind of people who said things like synergy without irony and probably had assistants to read their emails for them. Noah introduced me as his technical consultant and field specialist, which was a fancy way of saying the guy who actually knows how this stuff works in real life, and launched into the presentation. I watched him work through the slides we'd rebuilt together, and I had to admit, the man could sell. He had that corporate charisma thing down, the ability to make even mundane features sound revolutionary. But about 15 minutes in, one of the executives, a woman named Patricia something hyphenated who had the kind of severe haircut that screamed, "I will destroy you in contract negotiations," held up her hand. "This all sounds great in theory," she said, her tone suggesting she'd heard 1,000 pitches just like this and was thoroughly unimpressed with all of them. "But we've been burned before by companies promising seamless integration and easy installation, only to discover their systems require a specialized technician for every minor adjustment. What makes your product actually different?" Noah looked at me, and I realized this was my cue. I set down my coffee, which was indeed excellent. These tech companies knew their priorities and leaned forward. "Ma'am, I've been installing smart home systems for 5 years, and I can tell you exactly why most of them suck," I started, and I saw a couple of the executives sit up straighter. Apparently nobody had called their competitors' products terrible to their faces before, and they were intrigued. Most systems are designed by people who understand code but don't understand houses. They don't account for old wiring, weird floor plans, or the fact that the average homeowner has the technical expertise of a potato and just wants their lights to turn on when they flip a switch. I spent the next 20 minutes basically doing what I do best, explaining complicated technical concepts in a way that made sense to people who didn't speak engineer. I told them about the Parrot incident, about the family whose smart lock had locked them out during a snowstorm, about the elderly couple who'd given up on their expensive system because it required them to use 7 different apps just to adjust their thermostat. For every problem I described, I explained how Noah's system had actually solved it in ways that other products hadn't, because I'd installed enough of them to know the difference. Patricia was nodding now, actually taking notes. The other executives had stopped checking their phones and were paying attention. Noah was trying not to grin like an idiot because he could sense this was going way better than he'd hoped. "So what you're saying," Patricia said slowly, "is that your system is essentially idiot-proof." "I prefer human-proof," I corrected. "Because the problem isn't that people are stupid. It's that they're busy and stressed and just want their house to work without requiring a manual thicker than a phone book. Your system does that. It actually does what it promises, which in this industry is apparently revolutionary." There was a long pause, and then Patricia smiled. Not the polite corporate smile, but an actual genuine smile that suggested I'd just said exactly what she needed to hear. "Gentlemen," she said, looking at her fellow executives, "I think we've found our partner." The contract negotiation took another hour, but it was basically a formality at that point. By the time we walked out of that building, Noah had a signed partnership deal that was apparently a huge win for his company, and I had the surreal experience of having contributed something meaningful to a business deal worth more money than I'd see in my entire lifetime. "Dude," Noah said as we climbed back into the car service, You just saved my entire career. That presentation was going to be a disaster without you. How did you do that? Buddy, I've been explaining broken things my whole life, I said, pulling out my phone to check my messages. Mostly my marriage. Compared to that, explaining smart home systems is easy. My phone lit up with a new text from Melissa. Hope you're not sulking at home. We're having an amazing time. Smiling face with smiling eyes. I looked at the message, looked at Noah, and then pulled up my camera. Hey Noah, can you take a picture of me looking comfortable and successful? He grinned and grabbed my phone. I held up my champagne glass from earlier, which I'd saved specifically for this purpose because I'm petty like that, and gave the camera my best, living my best life smile. Noah snapped the photo, and I sent it to Melissa with the caption, sulking respectfully from business class. Hope your scam hotel is everything you dreamed. Clinking glasses. Her response came in about 30 seconds. What? I put my phone on silent and settled back into the comfortable leather seat. Sometimes revenge isn't about elaborate plans or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's just about living well and letting karma handle the rest. And based on the 3 dots appearing and disappearing in my text thread, karma was about to get very, very busy. After we left the TechVantage building, Noah was riding the kind of high that comes from closing a deal that probably just earned him a promotion and possibly a bonus big enough to buy a small yacht. The man was practically vibrating with excitement, making phone calls to his boss and various coworkers, using phrases like exceeded expectations and game-changing partnership, while I sat there feeling like I'd accidentally stumbled into someone else's success story and somehow gotten credit for it anyway. We need to celebrate, Noah announced after his 4th congratulatory phone call, turning to face me and Ivy in the back of the town car. This deal was huge, and you made it happen, Gavin. My company has a corporate account at this incredible hotel my dad used to take us to when I was a kid, the Grand Mirage. It's up in the hills, absolutely stunning views, the works. What do you say? My treat, obviously, since you just saved my professional reputation. I was mid-sip of the bottled water the car service had provided when those 2 words registered in my brain. The Grand Mirage. The exact same name as the sketchy website Hotel Melissa had insisted I book. The hotel with the Comic Sans rating and stolen photos from Cleveland office buildings. The hotel that Ivy and I had laughed about because it was so obviously a scam that even a desperate door-to-door salesman wouldn't fall for it. I choked on my water. Actually choked, like a cartoon character who'd just realized the universe had a better sense of humor than any professional comedian. You okay there? Noah asked, looking concerned while the driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror like he was calculating whether he'd need to perform the Heimlich. The Grand Mirage. I managed to get out between coughs. You said the Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel? Yeah, that's the one. Why, have you heard of it? Ivy started laughing. Not the polite kind of laughter you do when someone tells a mediocre joke at a funeral, but the deep, gasping, tears streaming down your face kind of laughter that comes from witnessing cosmic justice, so perfect it borders on divine intervention. Uncle Gavin, she wheezed, clutching her stomach. Please tell me this is the same hotel. Please tell me the universe is actually this poetic. Same name, I confirmed, feeling a grin spread across my face that probably made me look slightly unhinged. Noah, buddy, that's the exact hotel Melissa insisted I book from some sketchy website that looked like it was designed by someone who learned HTML from a GeoCities tutorial in 1997. The site she found had the same name, but was clearly a scam. Fake photos, no real contact information, the whole 9 yards of internet fraud. Noah's eyes widened. Wait, so your wife tried to book a fake version of a real hotel? That's actually impressive in how badly that could go wrong. Oh, it's going to go wrong, I said, pulling up the scam website on my phone to show him. This is what she found, and I'm willing to bet my lottery winnings, what's left of them, that she and her family are currently standing in front of some abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, screaming at each other about whose fault it is. Noah looked at the website, then at me, then started laughing so hard the driver actually pulled over to make sure we weren't having some kind of medical emergency. Dude, you have to come stay at the real one. You have to. The universe is literally handing you the most perfect revenge scenario in the history of failed marriages. How can you say no to karma served on a silver platter? With room service and Egyptian cotton sheets? I added. The thread count is probably higher than your wife's credit score, Noah confirmed. Ivy raised her hand like we were in class. I vote yes to the Karma Hotel. Plus, I really want to see what a real five-star place looks like compared to the fake one Mom probably showed me 1,000 pictures of. The decision was made. We redirected the driver and started heading toward the hills outside Los Angeles, winding up roads that got progressively more scenic and expensive-looking. The houses went from nice to ridiculous, the kind of places with gates and security cameras and probably helicopter pads on the roof. Everything was manicured and perfect, like we'd driven into a movie set where nothing bad was allowed to happen except in Act 2 for plot purposes. So let me get this straight, I said as we climbed higher, passing a view of downtown LA that looked like a postcard. The real Grand Mirage is this fancy place your family used to visit, and my wife found a scam site using the same name to trick people into thinking they're booking the legitimate hotel. Probably, Noah confirmed. It's a common scam. They clone the name and some photos of real luxury hotels, set up a fake booking site, take people's money, and then send them to some random address that's either abandoned or doesn't match what was advertised. By the time people realize they've been scammed, the website's already shut down and the scammers have moved on. That's diabolical, Ivy said, but she was smiling. And Mom fell for it because she was too busy imagining her Instagram posts to actually verify anything. In her defense, I said, feeling generous for about half a second, she was very focused on spending my money as quickly as possible. Due diligence takes time, and time doesn't get you likes on social media. The town car finally turned onto a private road marked with a discreet sign that just said Grand Mirage in elegant script. No luxury hotel in Comic Sans, no pixelated photos, just understated class that screamed, if you have to ask about prices, you can't afford it. We drove up a winding driveway lined with perfectly maintained landscaping that probably required a full-time staff of gardeners with degrees in horticulture, and then the hotel came into view. It was absolutely nothing like the photos on the scam website. This place was real, solid, majestic in a way that made you understand why people used words like breathtaking without being ironic. The building looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that luxury wasn't about being flashy. It was about being perfect in ways that made you feel inadequate about your entire life. There were actual fountains, actual valet parking, actual people in uniforms that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. You ever laugh so hard the universe joins in? I said as the valet opened my door, and I stepped out onto a circular driveway that was cleaner than my kitchen floor had ever been. The valet, a young guy who was definitely questioning the sanity of the disheveled middle-aged man who'd just emerged from the car, talking to himself, nodded politely. Frequently, sir. Welcome to the Grand Mirage. Noah was already heading toward the entrance, calling back, come on, Gavin. Let me show you what a real hotel looks like. Ivy rolled beside me, her wheelchair gliding smoothly over the immaculate pavement, and whispered, Uncle Gavin, this is Karma served with free Wi-Fi, and probably one of those fancy shower heads that makes you rethink your entire home renovation priorities. Kid, I think Karma is serving a full 7-course meal with wine pairings, I replied, following Noah into a lobby that looked like it had been decorated by someone whose day job was designing palaces for royalty. The interior made me want to apologize for my existence. Everything was marble and gold accents and lighting that somehow made everyone look better than they actually were, which was a neat trick I needed to figure out for my bathroom. There were fresh flowers everywhere, the kind that were probably replaced daily because God forbid a petal looked slightly wilted. The air smelled like expensive candles and the dreams of people who'd never shopped at Walmart. A concierge approached us immediately, smiling like we were the most important guests she'd seen all day, even though I was wearing jeans and a polo shirt that had a small coffee stain I tried to hide by tucking it into my belt. Mr. Grant, wonderful to see you again. We have your suite ready, and I understand you'll need an additional room. 2 rooms, actually, Noah said, gesturing to me and Ivy. And make sure one is fully accessible. My friend's niece needs wheelchair accommodations. Of course, sir. We have several accessible suites available. May I suggest the Mountain View Suite? It has a roll-in shower, wider doorways, and a balcony with what I'm told is a rather spectacular sunset view. Ivy looked at me with an expression that suggested she might actually cry from happiness. The kid had probably spent her entire life dealing with places that claimed to be wheelchair accessible, but actually meant, "We have a ramp somewhere in the back by the dumpsters, and good luck with everything else." "That sounds perfect," I said, then remembered I was supposed to be a responsible adult. "But Noah, man, I can't let you pay for all this. You've already done enough." "Gavin, you just helped me close a deal that's going to make my company about $15 million over the next 3 years," Noah interrupted, signing something the concierge handed him. "My boss literally called me a hero. Let me buy you a hotel room. Consider it an investment in our renewed friendship and also payment for putting up with what I'm assuming is about to be the most entertaining series of texts from your wife in the history of marital communication breakdowns." As if on cue, my phone started buzzing. Not just one text, but that rapid-fire buzzing that indicates someone is having a complete meltdown and has decided to document it via message. I pulled out my phone and saw 17 messages from Melissa, each one more frantic than the last. The most recent one just said, "Gavin, call me right now, this isn't funny." I looked at Noah, then at Ivy, then at the beautiful lobby of the Real Grand Mirage Luxury Hotel, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Genuine, uncomplicated joy. "I think I'm going to let those marinate for a bit," I said, putting my phone on silent and following the concierge toward the elevators. "Maybe check them after a hot shower and whatever room service this place offers." "The Colorado lamb is excellent," the concierge offered helpfully. "Perfect," I said. "I'll take that, and also whatever's most expensive, because apparently I'm celebrating my wife's poor life choices and excellent timing." As we rode the elevator up to our rooms, Ivy leaned over and whispered, "This is the best day ever, and I didn't even have to do anything except get abandoned at an airport." "Welcome to the club, kid," I said. "Population, people who are about to have a significantly better vacation than they planned." After we got settled into our respective rooms. And I used the term rooms loosely because my suite was approximately the size of my entire first floor at home and had a bathroom that could have housed a small family comfortably. I took what might have been the best shower of my entire adult life. The water pressure was powerful enough to strip paint. The temperature controls actually worked without requiring a degree in mechanical engineering, and there were about 7 different types of soap that all smelled like money and good decisions. I emerged feeling like a new man, or at least like a man who'd temporarily forgotten that his wife had abandoned him at an airport that morning. I threw on the complimentary bathrobe that was softer than anything I'd ever owned, ordered room service with the kind of reckless abandon that comes from knowing you're not paying for it, and settled onto the balcony to watch the sun start its descent over Los Angeles. The view was insane. You could see downtown, the ocean, and probably 3 different social classes from up here. It was the kind of view that made you understand why people went into debt for Instagram photos. Room service arrived about 20 minutes later, delivered by a guy who somehow made pushing a cart look dignified. He set up my food on the balcony table like he was preparing a state dinner, complete with actual silverware and a linen napkin that was probably worth more than my work uniform. I'd ordered a steak that cost $47, which felt obscene until I tasted it and realized that cows could apparently taste different when they'd lived better lives than me. And a side of truffle fries that were so good they made me question every French fry I'd ever eaten before this moment. I was about halfway through my steak, dipping my fries in some kind of aioli that probably had a name I couldn't pronounce, when my phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by a photo from our wedding where we both looked young and optimistic and deeply ignorant about what the next 13 years would bring. I let it ring twice more while I chewed thoughtfully on a truffle fry, considering my options. I could ignore it completely and enjoy my meal in peace. I could answer and immediately hang up, or I could answer and see just how badly her day had gone, which, based on her increasingly frantic texts, was probably somewhere between mild inconvenience and complete disaster requiring federal intervention. The petty part of my brain, which had gotten significantly louder since this morning, voted for option 3. I answered the call and put it on speaker because if I was going to witness a meltdown, I might as well have ambience. "Hello," I said pleasantly, like I was answering a call from a telemarketer I was about to politely decline. "How dare you trick us?" Melissa's voice exploded through my phone speaker so loudly that a bird on a nearby tree literally flew away in alarm. "This place is a dump. An actual dump. There's graffiti on the walls and broken windows, and I think I saw a raccoon." I nearly choked on my fry, which would have been a tragedy because these fries were too good to die during. I took a sip of the wine I'd also ordered, a Cabernet that the room service guy had recommended, and that tasted like liquid sophistication, and tried to keep my voice steady. "What dump?" I asked innocently, looking out at my spectacular view of the sunset painting the Los Angeles skyline in shades of gold and pink. "The hotel," she shrieked, and I could hear Tracy and Linda arguing in the background about whose fault this was. "The Grand Mirage. It's an abandoned building. There's no staff, no electricity. The address led us to the middle of nowhere up some sketchy mountain road, and we're stranded. You booked us a scam hotel." "Oh," I said, taking another deliberate bite of my steak. "You mean the hotel from that website you insisted I use? The one with the Comic Sans rating and the stolen photos? That hotel." There was a pause that lasted about 3 seconds too long, which told me she was rapidly calculating whether she could somehow make this my fault despite all available evidence pointing to her own stupidity. "You knew it was a scam," she finally shouted, her voice reaching frequencies that probably violated noise ordinances. "You knew and you booked it anyway to punish us." "Melissa, sweetheart, light of my increasingly dark life," I said, setting down my fork so I could give this conversation my full attention. "You found that website. You showed it to me. You insisted it was legitimate despite me pointing out approximately 17 red flags. You voted, democratically, as I recall, that we would use that exact hotel. I was just following orders from the family council. How is this my fault?" Noah appeared on the balcony next door, having clearly heard the shouting through the wall. He was grinning and holding his own glass of wine, gesturing that he wanted to listen in. I waved him over to my balcony and cranked up the speaker volume, because this was quickly becoming the best entertainment I'd had in years. "Fix this," Melissa demanded, her voice now joined by Tracy's indignant squawking and Linda's wine-soaked commentary about family loyalty. "Fix this right now, Gavin. We're stuck here with all our luggage and nowhere to stay, and it's getting dark." I said thoughtfully, watching Noah mouth, "This is amazing," while trying not to laugh. "That does sound like a problem. A problem that I'm currently unable to help with because, and this is important, I'm not there. Because you ditched me. At the airport. This morning. Remember? This isn't about that," she yelled, which was exactly what someone would say when they realized that it was, in fact, entirely about that. "It's absolutely about that," I corrected, popping another truffle fry into my mouth. "You made a series of choices today, Melissa. You chose to ditch your husband at an airport. You chose to take a trip using his money without him. You chose to use a sketchy website despite warnings. These are what we call consequences, and they're currently coming home to roost on your abandoned mountain road." Ivy rolled onto her balcony, attracted by the commotion, and I gestured for her to come over too. She parked next to Noah, her eyes wide with delight as she realized what was happening. "Put it on video," she whispered. "I want to see her face." I shook my head. Some pleasures were best experienced through audio only, where the imagination could really paint a picture. "Gavin, I swear to God, if you don't help us right now," Melissa started, but I cut her off. "You'll what? Abandon me at an airport? Too late. Spend my money without my permission? Already did that. Treat me like a walking ATM while simultaneously resenting my existence? That's been the last 13 years in a nutshell." I paused for effect, swirling my wine like I was some kind of villain in a movie who'd finally gotten the upper hand. "No, I don't think I'll be helping you out of this particular situation. Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of this incredible 5-star room service. Speaking of which," I held the phone away from my ear and called toward my suite door. "Excuse me, could I get another order of those truffle fries? And maybe the lamb your colleague mentioned earlier?" "Yes, the expensive one." "Perfect." Melissa was screaming something unintelligible now, a combination of curse words and threats, and what sounded like genuine panic. Linda had started crying in the background, the theatrical kind of crying she did when she wanted sympathy and attention. Tracy was on her phone, probably trying to figure out how to explain this disaster to her social media followers who thought she had her life together. "You know what the best part is?" I said, my voice calm and almost cheerful. "I'm actually at the Grand Mirage right now. The real one. The legitimate luxury hotel that you were trying to book. It's spectacular, Melissa. The bathroom has heated floors. The towels are fluffier than clouds. The view makes me understand why people write poetry. And the truffle fries. Oh my God, the truffle fries might be the best thing I've ever put in my mouth, and that includes the wedding cake at our reception. The screaming stopped. There was dead silence on the other end of the line, broken only by what sounded like Linda having some kind of wine-induced emotional breakdown. You're lying, Melissa finally said, but her voice had lost its confidence. She sounded like someone who'd just realized they'd been outplayed and was desperately hoping for a loophole. Am I, though? I took my phone off speaker and switched to video call, then panned the camera around my balcony, making sure to capture the sunset, the city view, the remains of my $47 steak, and the bathrobe that had the hotel's logo embroidered on it. Does this look like I'm lying? I heard her gasp, followed by Tracy shrieking, "Is that the real hotel?" in the background. Sure is, I confirmed, switching back to audio only because her face had gone an interesting shade of purple that suggested her blood pressure was reaching medically concerning levels. Noah Grant, remember him from college? The successful one? We ran into each other at the airport, and he offered to bring me along on his business trip. Turned out to be pretty fortuitous, all things considered. This is your fault, Melissa screamed, and I could hear the desperation in her voice now. You set us up. You knew that website was fake, and you let us book it. I pointed out it was fake. I corrected. Multiple times. You called me negative and told me not to ruin the vibe. This is the vibe you created, babe. How's it feeling? Noah was literally crying with laughter now, trying to stay quiet, but failing miserably. Ivy had her phone out, probably recording audio for posterity or maybe for future blackmail purposes. Gavin, please, Melissa said, and her voice had shifted to the pleading tone she used when she wanted something and had run out of other options. We're stranded. We need help. Can you book us rooms somewhere? Anywhere. I thought about it for exactly half a second. No, you're just going to leave us here. You left me at an airport this morning, I reminded her. Turnabout is fair play. Also, I'm going to finish my dinner now because that lamb just arrived and it looks incredible. Good luck with your raccoon friend. I hear they're very intelligent animals. Maybe he can help you figure out your next move. Gavin. I hung up, just pressed the red button, and ended the call with the kind of satisfaction that probably should have worried me, but instead felt absolutely perfect. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I silenced it and set it face down on the table. That, Noah said, raising his wine glass in a toast, was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. You're my hero. Uncle Gavin, Ivy added. I'm putting you in my will. That was art. I picked up my wine glass and clinked it against Noah's. To terrible wives, fake hotels, and the kind of karma that comes with truffle fries. An expensive lamb, Noah added, eyeing my new plate. Want to split it? I offered. I feel like this moment deserves to be shared. We spent the next hour eating overpriced hotel food, drinking wine that I couldn't pronounce, and watching my phone light up with increasingly desperate messages that I had absolutely no intention of answering. Somewhere down that mountain, my wife was having the worst day of her life, and I was having one of the best days of mine. Funny how that works out sometimes. 3 days in Los Angeles passed like a dream where everything actually goes right for once, which was disorienting because I'd spent the last 13 years in a nightmare where nothing ever did. Noah and I turned his business meeting success into an extended celebration involving more steakhouses than my cardiologist would approve of, a Dodgers game where we had box seats, and several profound conversations about life, marriage, and why we'd both been idiots in our 20s. Ivy got to experience what a real vacation looked like when people actually wanted you around, complete with accessible tours and zero-guilt trips about existing. But eventually, reality called. Specifically, my boss called asking when I'd be back, because apparently refrigerators don't fix themselves and Mrs. Henderson's ice maker was making concerning noises again, which probably meant she'd been hitting it with a shoe like last time. I caught a flight home, dropped Ivy off at her place. She hugged me goodbye and made me promise we'd do this again, minus the family abandonment part, and drove back to my house with the kind of dread usually reserved for dental appointments and jury duty. The house was empty. Blessed, beautiful, silent empty. No Melissa staging photos in the kitchen, no Linda criticizing my lawn maintenance, no Tracy bragging about her latest pyramid scheme disguised as entrepreneurship. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you realize how much noise pollution you've been living with. I was pouring myself coffee and contemplating whether coming home had been a mistake when I noticed the landline answering machine blinking like a strobe light at a rave. 23 messages. 23. I hit play expecting Melissa's voice, but instead got something way better. This is Officer Martinez with the Los Angeles Police Department, calling for Gavin Cole regarding Melissa Cole, Linda Henderson, and Tracy Morrison. I'm not ashamed to admit I laughed so hard I snorted coffee through my nose, which hurt, but was absolutely worth it. Apparently, after getting stranded at their fake hotel, the three of them had tried to economize by shoplifting sandwiches from a convenience store. Security caught them. Things escalated. They'd rented a car using my credit card, which I immediately disputed. Thank you very much. And in their panic to escape some imaginary persecution, Tracy crashed it into a parked police cruiser. You literally cannot make this stuff up. Reality had become more ridiculous than anything I could have invented. The fallout was spectacular. Linda got arrested for disorderly conduct and lost her presidency at her precious social club. Apparently, being a criminal doesn't play well with the wine and gossip crowd. Tracy got banned from her gym for bringing negative energy and legal drama into their wellness space, which was the most LA sentence I'd ever heard. And Melissa? Oh, sweet karma. Her influencer sponsorship with that sketchy diet tea company dropped her immediately, citing misalignment with brand values. Because apparently giving people diarrhea is fine, but petty theft crosses the line. I saved all the voicemails, poured another coffee, and smiled. Sometimes the universe doesn't just give you justice. It gives you a comedy show with perfect timing. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new apartment, a place that's entirely mine, decorated with furniture I actually like, and blissfully free of anyone telling me my energy is too average. The divorce papers came through faster than Melissa could say, but what about my half? Mostly because her lawyer took one look at the airport abandonment evidence, the credit card fraud, and the police reports, and basically told her to take whatever I offered and run. I offered her nothing. She ran anyway. Ivy lives in the complex now, just 2 floors down. Turns out Tracy's parenting was more neglect than guidance. So the moment Ivy turned 18, she moved out with money I helped her access from her dad's child support account that Tracy had been managing. The kid started a podcast called Will Life with Ivy, where she talks about disability rights, toxic family dynamics, and occasionally roasts her mother's MLM schemes. It's got 50,000 subscribers and actual sponsors. I help edit episodes and provide technical support, which is way more fulfilling than fixing refrigerators, though I still do that too because bills exist. Noah and I turned that LA business deal into a full partnership. His company hired me as a technical consultant, which means I get paid obscene amounts of money to tell engineers why their smart home systems suck and how to fix them. I work remotely most days, occasionally fly out for meetings, and have business cards that make me sound way more important than I actually am. Melissa calls sometimes from random numbers I don't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. Her messages start apologetic, turn manipulative, then eventually just sound tired. Linda apparently moved in with her after losing her house. Something about unpaid property taxes and wine expenses. Tracy's on her 3rd MLM this year. The 3 of them are living together in some apartment complex, probably making each other miserable, which feels like justice served with a side of poetic irony. Every now and then, I pour myself a drink, raise a glass to freedom, and laugh. Because the best trip of my life was the one I didn't take with them. Turns out getting abandoned at an airport was the universe's way of saying, "You're free now, buddy. Don't waste it." I didn't.